Michael Zeck, a professional artist since 1974, predominantly Marvel artist, some with DC. Well, hard to remember because I was about, truthfully, even preschool. I mean, my earliest memories might be from 3 or 4 years old. And believe it or not, my actual earliest memories being in a hospital bed, I guess my tonsils were being taken out, but like I said, maybe 3 or 4. And my memory of it is being in the bed, being surrounded by comics in that hospital bed. So I don't even have a memory where I didn't have comics in my life. At that time, it was like Gene Autry and Roy Rogers, for the little boy. But all I did was chase comics, and no matter where it was. I mean, they were everywhere, obviously, at that time, spinner racks. But I even enjoyed going to the barber shop because while I was waiting for the haircut, he had a stack of comics. Yeah, and this, like I said, this is still preschool. I just was reading, tracing, trying to draw them as much as possible, and I never stopped. Just never stopped. So it's one of those rare instances where you've got somebody who kind of knows what they want to do from their earliest memory, all the way through. There was never, ever another thing that I was ever interested in doing, ever. After practice, all my young life, I did go to art school, Ringling School of Art, Sarasota, Florida. And then took a few years off to fool around a bit, and then just worked on a portfolio and started submitting that and doing what some people do today, although I don't see it that much today, bringing portfolios. But the biggest show back then, in around 1970, 71, was Phil Seuling's New York show. And being in New York, most of the publishers were there. So I did take my portfolio and pushed it around, and eventually landed some work at Charlton Comics, which was kind of like the only other avenue, but so many people of my generation kind of went through that door as well. Worked for them for a couple years on their horror titles, and then kind of made the transition to Marvel and stayed with Marvel for a long time. Right, I mean, I'd worked with DeMatteis on Captain America for quite a while. I was on Captain America for 3 years. And stuck around even for a while after that doing covers. Really liked the character. That was actually one of the characters that, even as a fan, I wanted to draw that character. So that was kind of a dream come true thing, to be actually on Captain America for a while. But, that, in a way, that was a lucky thing to do as well, to work with DeMatteis, because we got along very well, and he, in online, there's I think he did it on his blog or somewhere, but there's quite a good explanation of the genesis of that story, the Kraven's Last Hunt, because it had been around for, I think, at least 8 years, maybe even more, and I forget, there were 2 different iterations he wanted. I know one was Batman Joker. He'd written it for that, and then he tried it again somewhere else with other characters. It was just one of those things, the timing of something, and then he finally had the idea to do it with Spider-Man, but he got the hook when he was reading about Kraven and found out about his Russian background. That was what made him do then how he wanted to treat Kraven, and I think as well as anything else, that was the first time Kraven was ever really defined in a comic, after all those years from the 60s and through the 80s, and he was the one who finally did define Kraven the Hunter. But he approached Marvel with it, and then he also approached me based on our history with Captain America and stuff. So boy, he sent me the plot, and I knew when I read the plot that it was one of the best Spider-Man stories I'd ever read. And at that point, I felt lucky to have the plot and work on it. And I was just hoping that the fans would have the same reaction I did to the story. It was just too good, just too great. And fortunately, yes. I mean, it's almost 30 years later now, and it's still in print. It's still being talked about. It's still voted sometimes best Spider-Man story of all time in some of the online polls. So I'm very gratified by that. You know, I didn't come in wanting to draw everybody like a George Perez or something. I wasn't that kind of person. I mentioned Captain America as one person I really did want to draw. Well, I shouldn't say everyone, but I surely wanted to do Spider-Man at some point. I think everyone kind of wants to do their Batman as well. And well, in Secret Wars, I kind of did my Perez thing. I got to draw a little bit of all the Marvel characters there. But really, in the course of my career, I'm here now, and I don't have that undone story or that character that I didn't get to draw. None of that. You know, I kind of did what I wanted to do while I was in there, and I was quite lucky, really, with not only Secret Wars. Secret Wars was the '80s. Secret Wars was first. I followed that with the Punisher limited series, and even though he'd been around for a while, that limited series defined the character. And then Kraven's Last Hunt, and even though Kraven had been around for decades, that series defined the character. And all the three that I mentioned are still in print today, still talked about, and that's very lucky. You know, that's like an actor getting 3 hit TV series or something. It's almost unheard of, you know, so extremely lucky. And it's surprising that someone didn't think of that when Marvel came out with Secret Wars again 30 years later. Well, you know, you'd think that more people than Shelton might have had the idea to go back to the source guys, you know, and have them do a variant. But Marvel didn't approach me, no one else approached me. Shelton had the idea, great idea. And thanks to him and the staff here for you know, helping me. I'm not as up on the current characters as I should be, so they were all a big help in deciding maybe what other characters we were going to handle or put on the cover to replace all the existing covers. But great fun, big hit, and you know, hopefully we'll do it again. I still have an affinity, I guess, for I guess I'll call them analog comics as opposed to the digital comics of today. Even though it was such a limited color palette and the printing was terrible, but there was a certain feel to those things. That, I mean, I guess that's my golden age. And the comics kind of lost me. Some of the digital coloring has lost me. I think they're taking some of it too far, and I also think there's a certain style now with overly detailed costumes, with overly detailed rendering on those overly detailed costumes, and I mean, it's fine if it captures the fans' attention. That's all good, but it's not what I really like. You know, I go back to the Kirby style and the Buscema style and those. You know, everybody asks me who influenced me, but it's really everybody. And I think I said earlier, you know, my comic book fan days were even prior to Marvel Comics, so I was a fan of Gil Kane and Carmine Infantino, you know, the Green Lantern, the Flash, even Kurt Swan. Big fan of Joe Kubert, the war books that DC was putting out. I can't think of anybody that didn't influence me back then. And then the Marvel age came along, and I was at that perfect age to get caught up in that. And then everybody in there, you know, Kirby and Ditko very much. In fact, I was even something of a Ditko fan from the pre-superhero horror Marvel comics, and Charlton. I had already noticed his work, something of a fan already, and really anybody that came along and raised the bar after that. Buscema, for one, Neil Adams, Steranko, all the old Wally Wood, any of the old EC guys, Frazetta, when I would discover those people, Williamson. It's just endless. It's just an endless line of people that I've admired and been somewhat influenced by.